My name is Tim Rainey. I'm chairman of the board. Mr. Josh Whitehead serves as secretary of the board. Mr. Whitehead, may I get a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Baker.
Here.
Mr. Claybrook.
Here.
Ms. Doss. Mr. Jackson.
Here.
Mr. Malazary.
Here.
Vice Chair Savage Towns.
Here.
Ms. Scarlock.
Here.
And Mr. Chairman.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Mr. Penzas, these speakers aren't on like they sometimes are. So I can't hear Mr. Whitehead very well. So I don't know how to, at least mine wasn't on. I'm just letting you know, but I'm gonna keep moving. Could you hear out of any? JT, could you hear out of your speaker? Testing.
Yeah, now again.
Okay.
I can barely hear.
Okay. It's a little, okay. Thank y'all. The Memphis and Shelby County Board of Adjustment is the oldest appointed governmental body in Memphis and Shelby County. We were established in 1925. The board hears appeals from the administration of the zoning ordinance, requests for variances from the zoning ordinance, and other requests as articulated by local zoning laws adopted pursuant to the enabling legislation. The 8 members of the board are appointed, 4 by the mayor of Memphis and 4 by the mayor of Shelby County, with confirmation by the Memphis City Council or the Shelby County Board of Commissioners. We serve without remuneration. At this time, I'd like to swear in the staff. You may all remain seated. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. May I get a motion to approve the minutes from last month's meeting, please?
So move. Second.
All right. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Mr. Secretary, could you provide us a secretary's report, if there is one for this month, and then explain the procedure for this meeting?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Our procedure for this afternoon will be as follows. I will call out each case as listed on the agenda. Copies of the agenda are both on the board's website as well as at the front podium to your right. For each case, the Division of Planning and Development will give a presentation consisting of site plans, photographs, and maps of the subject property. At the conclusion of that staff presentation, the applicant will be given an opportunity to present his or her case. Following the applicant's time to testify, we will go to the supporters and finally to the opposition. After those 10-minute periods of time, we will go back to the applicant for a 2-minute rebuttal period. The applicant can combine that 2-minute rebuttal period with some of his or her 10-minute speaking period. These times do not include Q&A time between members of the public and members of the board. At the conclusion of the testimony, the body will make a motion and get a second, which will close the public hearing, and the board will then deliberate and vote. If any member of the speaker of the dais would like to hear additional testimony, a 2/3 vote is required according to our rules of procedure. And once we reopen a public hearing, we are obligated by the rules to hear an equal amount of time from both sides of the issue. All motions made by this board will be made in the affirmative. The private acts governing the board require a vote of 5 members to approve an application, regardless of the number of board members present. The board may also vote to hold a case no longer than 30 days without the consent of the applicant and up to 90 days with the consent of the applicant. All section numbers we refer to this afternoon come from the Memphis and Shelby County Unified Development Code, which was adopted by the Memphis City Council and the Shelby County Board of Commissioners in 2010. I will introduce the entire UDC to make it part of today's record. The board is vested with the power to act on these cases under the provisions of Chapter 9.22 of the Code. Mr. Chairman, I submit that all cases have been filed in proper order. All applicants have been notified, as well as all other notice requirements under the Code.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. At this point, the board will establish a consent agenda. To establish the consent agenda, the Secretary will call out each eligible case. If any member of the audience, staff, or a board member objects to a case being placed on the consent agenda, he or she should do so by a show of hands when the Secretary reads that case. Once the consent agenda is established, the board will vote on all cases placed on consent as a whole and will not hold individual public hearings on each case. So that means if your case goes on consent and you have any issues with any of the conditions or questions, you need to hold your hand up and make sure we hear it, because it'll just be approved as the staff report showed. So, Mr. Secretary, which items on our agenda are eligible to be placed on consent today?
Mr. Chairman, beginning with docket number 20 BOA 2110 The applicants are John W. and Maritza A. Sparks. The use district is the R6 district, and the request is a variance from section 361 to allow an encroachment into the side yard setback. Agenda item number 2, that's docket BOA 21-113, located at 629 Prescott. The applicant is Cameron Ellis. The use district is the RU3 multifamily district within the University District overlay. The request is a variance from section 372 to allow a large home, a quadplex, on a lot of less than 10,000 square feet. And again, as we go through these, if you have any objections for the case to be approved or held on the consent agenda, just raise your hand. Item number 3 is docket BOA 21-114, located at 6337 Summer. The applicant is Wyrick Properties. The use district is the R8 residential single-family zoning district within a planned development. The request is a variance from subsection 496C to allow a sign to encroach 3 feet into the right-of-way. Agenda item number 4, docket BOA 21-115, located at 31 West Gage. The applicant is Zachary Self. The use district is the R6 single-family district, and the request is a use variance from 252 to legitimize 2 existing duplexes. Agenda item number 5 is docket BOA 21-116, located at 1801 Carr. The applicants are Paul and Jennifer Gresham. The use district is the R6 single-family district within a historic overlay, and the request is variance from paragraph 272D1 to allow an accessory dwelling unit on a lot of less than 10,000 square feet. Agenda item number 6 and 7, if on consent, will be 1 month holds. Number 6 is docket BOA 21-117 at 6847 Center College. The applicant is Tipton County Pause and Clause. The use district is the CA district, and the request is a modification to a use variance approved with docket BOA 86-211 to allow an animal hospital and boarding establishment. And Mr. Chairman, the purpose of staff recommendation of a hold is to address a parcel that sits to the south and to the rear of this subject site that has no street access. Agenda item number 7 is docket BOA 21-118, located at 9053 Barrett. The applicant is Barrett Matthews. The use district is the CA Conservation Agricultural District, and the request is a use variance from section 252 to allow an expansion of an existing restaurant. And Mr. Chairman, the applicant is requesting a hold to meet with the neighboring property owners on this one. Agenda item number 8 is docket BOA 21-119, located at 235 Chelsea. The applicant is the City of Memphis Fire Services Division. The use district is the MDR Moderate Density Residential District within the Uptown Special Purpose District. And the request are variances from Chapter 7.3 to allow a fire station. Number 9, Mr. Chairman, staff is recommending rejection, so we will hear that. Item number 10 is our third and final hold. That's docket BOA 21-122, located on the north side of A.W. Willis between 3rd and 4th. The applicant is Alsac. The use district is districts are the mixed-use MU and the high-density residential HDR zoning districts within the Uptown Special Purpose District, and the request is a use variance from 7-311 to allow a parking garage with 2 bulk variances. Item number 11, we will hear. We are recommending rejection. And finally, item number 12, docket BOA 21-124, which is a correspondence to a case heard earlier this year. 2173, located at 164 Keel. The applicant is Menagerie Engineering. The use district is the MDR Moderate Density District, and the request is a modification of the conditions of that case, BOA 2173. And Mr. Chairman, for those of y'all who have hard copy packets, the applicant and staff have massaged condition number 1 as presented in the staff report to read: non-use variances allowing accessory dwelling units on lots 1 and 4 of Uptown Redevelopment Subdivision 11 as illustrated on the site plan, period. And here's the amendment. The applicant shall either, 1, submit a revised plan reflecting principal structures with a wraparound front porches 14 feet in length and 8 feet in depth, or 2, submit a revised landscaping plan reflecting increased landscaping located in the side yards, both of which would be subject to review by staff. No parking shall be allowed within the increased side yard built to lines. No substantive changes with that, Mr. Chairman, but we did want to make it a little clearer for future reference. With that, Mr. Chairman, that's the consent calendar.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary. May I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, which is going to be agenda items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as a hold, 7 as a hold, 8, 10 as a hold, and 11 as conditioned by staff?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
would this gentleman raise his hand for 10?
Oh, you raised your hand for 10? Okay, we'll pull those. 9 is already a here, right? No. You said the fire station?
Mr. Gentleman, can you speak on the microphone?
Yeah, I was here for kind of opposition to number 9 and number 11, I believe. The town developments of the fire station and the parking garage.
Let me look.
9 and 11?
No, I don't think those are the right numbers, though.
8.
Can you describe them?
10 is the
10?
parking garage.
Station in Uptown is
That's
BOA
8.
8 and 10. 8 and 10.
8 and 10. We're hearing 9 already.
It's not 119.
Okay, we'll pull both of those.
Well, 10 is a hold.
10's a hold.
We can hear it, but we're probably going to hear it again next month. So usually in that circumstance, we don't hear it twice. So unless
Okay.
the body would like to hear number 10,
Okay.
we'll go ahead and.
All right, we'll pull 8 off,
Yes.
and then we're gonna can we do a vote on everything but 10 and then vote to consent 10, or should we just go ahead and discuss it? Have that in our discussion. I'm going to restate the motion. So I'm going to see if we can move to approve as conditioned by staff cases 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as a hold, 7 as a hold, 10 as a hold, and 12. And we'll discuss 10 after we have that motion on the floor. Do we have that? Who gave us our second? Could they second again?
I think I interrupted before anybody.
Okay, so there hadn't been a second. Okay.
No.
Is there a second?
Second.
Does anyone want to discuss whether they want to hear number 10? Is the applicant even present on number 10 today? I know we had a lot of issues with number 10, and the purpose of the hold was to get together with the neighborhood. So I'd be in favor of just holding it as opposed to hearing it today.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
We don't have really any staff report or anything to look at.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what we'd be able to accomplish by
Right.
hearing it.
I agree.
Right now.
Okay, so we'll leave in number 10. With that, I assume y'all are ready to vote. Mr. Whitehead, would you give us a voice vote, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. There was a lot going on. Who made the motion?
The motion was, who seconded it? Was it Mr. Jackson that seconded it? Yes.
Jackson. Ms. Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Piper?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Malazri?
Yes, but I need to recuse myself from 12.
Cues on 12. Vice Chair Savage Towns?
Yes, I find that the standards of 9.22.6 of the UDC are being met and will not be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
And Ms. Scurlock?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
7 ayes.
All right. So if you were here for those cases, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as a hold, 7 as a hold, 10 as a hold, and 12, then you've been approved as conditioned by staff or held. So y'all are free to go. You're done for the day. And let the record show that Ms. Doss has joined us. And then, Mr. Secretary, if you'll call our first case we're going to hear today, which I believe is 8.
Agenda item 8 is docket BOA 21-119, located at 235 Chelsea. Again, the applicant is City of Memphis Fire Services Division, and the use district is the MDR, Moderate Density Residential District within the Uptown Special Purposes District.
All right, very good. I see the applicant has walked forward, and I know we have some opposition. Could we get a staff report on this real quick, Mr.
Yes,
Is
sir,
Mr. Davis here?
Chairman. If I can have Mr. Lucas.
Mr. Lucas will-
call up the PowerPoint.
Okay,
We had an illness of Mr. Davis.
okay.
So I'll be presenting this. This is in the Uptown Special Purpose District as well as the Uptown Redevelopment District in the TIF district of Uptown. This is on property that was acquired by the land bank established for that TIF district and conveyed to the city of Memphis for a new fire station. And if we can scroll down to the site plan, Mr. Lucas, I think that's page 9, and Mr. Penzis is going to turn the lights down so we can focus in on the site plan showing some of the variances. If you are familiar, Mr. Chairman, there are build-to lines which are frequently subject to action by this board and/or the Liens Control Board. The Uptown Special Purpose District regulations require a build-to line of up to a certain point and no further than a certain point. This is to encourage certain pedestrian activity, pedestrian-oriented buildings, etc. If you can think about the real core of the Uptown District and where you see these regulations manifested to the largest degree is in the Pinch District, namely some of the new buildings that are being developed in the Pinch District, but also, quite frankly, the historic buildings which adhere to these regulations. So our site plan here, this covers that block on the south side of Chelsea, running from 4th Street on the west to 5th Street on the east. And due to the nature of the use, a fire station, there are some variances required from those build-to lines. This is a municipal use in the zoning district, and we felt, we agreed with the applicant that the trapezoidal shape of this property made siting a building on it, meeting those build-to lines, practically difficult. And so staff is agreeing with the applicant and recommending approval with conditions. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm available for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary. Are there any questions for staff? All right, seeing none, if the applicant would like to come forward and give their name and address for the record.
Hello, Board. My name is Trent Harrell. I'm representative of the Reeves firm. Reeves firm is 6800 Poplar Avenue, Suite 101, Memphis, Tennessee.
Okay, do you swear to tell the whole truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Harrell.
I agree with the conditions that the board has presented, and I'd like to say the resident is coming for a rebuttal on this matter.
Okay. All right, is there anybody else here needs to speak now on behalf of the applicant? Seeing none. Okay, if the opposition would come forward and give their name and address for the record. Got it.
My name is John D'Onofrio. I live at 699 North 5th Street. So I'm a couple of parcels south of this development.
Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Okay. So there's a variety of reasons why I would oppose the idea of a fire station being directly next to my apartment. I think the use is incompatible with a largely residential neighborhood, as a fire station would generate a high level of noise. In addition to reasons that there being another fire station within 6 blocks of here over on Thomas Street, in addition to a few other within close proximity, all within about 1.5 miles. Also, the city is closing a couple of fire stations, I think number 5 and number 1. Both represent pretty remarkable mid-century architecture that's heritage for the city. And to replace them, they're building this new number 1 in Uptown, which leaves some aesthetics to be desired. In regards to both site planning and site strategy for the building. I think the planning is largely suburban, which is contrary to Memphis 3.0 and this rapidly developing neighborhood. Just across the street on Chelsea and 2nd Street, there's a lot of new construction going on over there. It's much more dense, so I don't think this is the highest and best use for this large parcel.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Laughlin? Seeing none, thank you so much for coming down. Is there anyone else here to speak in opposition to this case? Seeing none, we'll move back to rebuttal where we have 12 minutes if you need it. Don't feel compelled to use it all if you don't want to. So Mr. Harrell, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. The fire station has done studies, and yes, there are existing fire stations in the area. And I don't know if they do plan to close the existing one within proximity, but I'm sure the one near it is aging, and this is part of their plan to update and to upkeep their fire services and to better serve the community.
Okay.
That's all.
Are there any questions for the applicant? All right, hearing none. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions for staff before we move to discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for staff.
Yes, ma'am.
Is this a use variation, or is this use permitted? Because it's a public use or because it's permitted by the regulations?
This use is not specifically permitted in the use table for Uptown. However, because it's been owned by the city or the land bank of the city, it falls under one of the exceptions of the rule for city-owned properties. So it's an unlisted use specifically in the Uptown use chart, and the Uptown regulations say if you don't have an unlisted uses are prohibited. So in that regard, you could consider it a use variance. But then there's this catch-all language in Chapter 10 of the UDC that kind of exempts properties that were owned by the city at the time of the adoption of the UDC. So we found that could apply here.
So, can I?
Yeah, continue, please.
So a public use isn't automatically permitted?
So if there were not bulk variances, would we have, I guess if I...
That's what I'm asking
question,
you, yeah.
If this wasn't here for bulk variances, would we have taken this to you? No.
Okay.
Are there any other questions of staff? Hearing none, I assume you're ready to go into discussion. Would somebody give us a motion to approve BOA 21-119 as conditioned by staff?
So moved.
Second.
I'll be moving second. We're now in discussion. Are there any thoughts on this case before we vote?
I think this guy's trying to say.
Well, we've moved past that part of the... Yeah, once we move to discussion, we don't have, like, you basically had your chance to talk. They rebutted, so there's nothing really... Yeah. We appreciate it.
The chart you see typically would require special use permit.
Yeah, well, we're beyond that. Is there any discussion of this case? Seeing none, I think I like old architecture as much as anybody else, but sometimes you got to build new to get the way things work and get the trucks and everything, just to, the technology that's in fire changes over time. So sometimes you just got to build new. So, go ahead, Mr. Jackson.
Question for staff. On the south property line, southeast property line, east of the alley, is that a chain link fence all along the south? And how close is that residence to that fence? Is there a residence right there? Or is that a vacant lot?
Mr. Skinner, if you scroll up, that is an occupied lot. If you scroll up to page 6, Mr. Skinner, that is an occupied lot by a house. So, and yes, the site plan does indicate chain link fence. And if you would mind me answering your next question, does this body have the authority to change that? Yes.
In reviewing this, you know, I agree with the gentleman who was in dissent of this that, you know, it doesn't really architecture fit the space, but I think in this case, you know, public safety overrules a lot. And in this one, I think it's gonna win. But I do think that something more than a chain link fence should be put on that south property line, specifically adjacent to that residence that's so close. And I'm looking at the landscape plan there and I see it, but if I was living in that house there, I would definitely want more than chain link fence. I would want some type of masonry fencing there to screen that public use from my property. And I think it should be all along the south property line. Whether that be concrete panel fence, masonry fence, or something, and a minimum of 6 feet high. I'd like to know how the board members feel about that.
So you don't want just a wood fence, you want something a little thicker than that?
Yeah.
Okay. I would be amenable to that condition. Yeah, so I think we could add that in. So let's look at our conditions. I guess it'd be a simple condition of, you know, Mr. Whitehead could give us a better condition than I can for what we're talking about, I'm sure.
I've started, but I need Mr. Jackson to fill in the last part. I have started a new condition number 2, reading the fencing along the south property line shall be of the following materials, of one of the following materials, colon.
Masonry or decorative concrete panels.
And then I'd like to end at the very end of that, include a height, minimum height.
Minimum height of 6 feet.
I have a question too. So I just pulled, as he was asking the question, I pulled it up on my phone, and of course this picture the overhead could be dated. Is there an alley that's being closed? Like, it looks like there's a concrete between 4th and 5th that bisects the property, but I don't know if we can
Yes,
zoom in.
Mr. Skinner, if you go up one more slide, this is our zoning map that
Gotcha.
shows all the entitlements, zoning entitlements, and outlined in black and filled in with light gray are our street closures.
Okay.
This went to the city council specifically for this use a couple years ago, and the alley, the north-south alley, and the east-west street were both closed.
Okay, that makes sense.
The height of the building?
Height of the building looks like.
I'm trying to see it, but
Quite.
On page 12, the height to the main roof, not to any appurtenance, appears to be 36 feet. 12 plus 12 plus 6, maybe 30 feet.
Okay.
They make me do the old.
Does that help, Ms. Doss? Do you have a?
oh, I mean, when we were talking about the fence, I was just curious,
That
you know,
could be
what the fence is like in relationship to the height of the actual building. And then, I mean, I know it provides a barrier, physical barrier.
It seems more like it's going to block cars and headlights, not the building, right? 8 feet seem too tall?
Yeah, if I may, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman.
Uh-huh.
The reason I went 6 instead of 8 was I imagine myself living in the house there to the southeast with an 8-foot masonry fence. That would kind of, and as close as the residence is to the fence,
Sure.
it to me would seem imposing. The 6-foot height, if you're standing outside, really takes it out of view because you're so close. And with the proposed landscaping that's there, and I recommend we keep that, you'll get the green tips above it, which I think will help.
So it gives you privacy without putting you in a cage?
Yes, right.
Okay.
That's it.
All right. Any other discussion? And so, do we need to, would the person that made the motion and seconded, y'all agree to add that condition to this?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, then agreed to. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I assume you're ready to vote. Mr. Whitehead, will you give us a roll call, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Vice Chair Savage Towns.
Yes, I find that the standards of 9.22.6 of the UDC are being met and will not be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
Ms. Gerlach.
She abstained.
Oh. Ms. Baker.
Yes.
Mr. Claybrook.
Yes.
Ms. Doss.
Yes.
Mr. Jackson.
Yes.
Mr. Melandri.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
7 ayes and 1 recused.
All right, it has been approved as conditioned. Mr. Whitehead, will you call the next case for us, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. That brings us to item number 9. That's docket BOA 21-121, located at 2250 Central. The applicant is Dixie Rents Incorporated. The use districts are the CMU commercial mixed use and the RU3 multifamily residential districts within the Midtown Overlay District. And the request is a variance from 483 to allow outdoor storage and a use variance from 847 to allow a commercial accessory use, a parking lot within a residential district, as well as from subsection 848D to allow parking within the setback of an urban frontage.
Okay, I believe the applicant's here. Is there any opposition to this case? Seeing none. Mr. Skinner, will you give us a brief staff report on this?
Absolutely. Lucas Skinner with the Division of Planning and Development. Again, this is BOA 2021-121, and again, multiple variances related to accessory outdoor storage and the Midtown Overlay located at 2250 Central Avenue. Here's just a zoning aerial footage. This is at the corner of Central Avenue and York Street in the Cooper Young neighborhood. The site is outlined in yellow there in the picture. Here's a land use map to give you an idea of what's happening. As many of you probably know, there's many commercial uses along Central Avenue, and then there are residential uses to the north. Here's some site photos from Google from 2019. This is right along, one on the left is at Central in New York, and then the photo on the right is from York Street. Here are some current site photos from October of this year. So this is what the site currently looks like. Somewhat of a site plan submitted from the applicant, again, really just sort of showing the building that they have to the east of this site, and then the 2250 Central being the parking lot that is in question. For a little site zoning history, there have been several plan developments that have been filed. I won't go too much into this, but the way that the site sort of got into the state that it's in was from PD 13-304, which was for a restaurant with a parking lot to the north. And essentially the building itself never was actualized, but the parking lot was paved. So that is essentially how we got to where the site looks now. Staff conclusions, essentially staff found that this site isn't ideal for the neighborhood setting that it's in for this use, as generally this use is only found in industrial districts. And so staff is recommending rejection. However, if approved, staff is recommending 6 conditions. And I'm available for any questions.
Are there any questions for staff? Seeing none. Okay, if the applicant would come forward and state your name and address for the record.
I'm Lance Garing with Party Concepts, Dixie Rents at 2256 Central.
Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
All right, go ahead and share with us, sir.
guess our misunderstanding is we didn't know 2250 curves around 2256. Where we're wanting to put the containers is up against the building at 2256. There's 12 feet of grass there before we get to the concrete, so the 20-foot containers would come 8 feet onto the concrete, but they would essentially, 3 of them, be part of the building. There won't be anything outside the side of the building. And plus, we put an 8-foot fence there down in New York and a 7-foot across. So you won't be able to see the containers from the view that he took those pictures from, or whoever took those pictures from. They're going to be butted right up to the building. If we can go to that overhead site plan, Mr. Skinner. You see that dark space right there, right behind the building there where the red line is? Mm-hmm. That's 12 feet of grass behind the building. That's where we're wanting to put those, with the door opening the concrete so we can load in. We have about 50% of our customers are walk-ins. They drive up and we're loading tables and chairs in the back of trucks, and we just need a spot that's easy for our employees to go in and out to carry the chairs out so they're not lifting them up off the back of a truck or coming through the building. And I also wanted to make a comment about, it seems like we didn't downsize to this. We have a 4,000 square foot warehouse on Summer that will house our delivery items, but hey, we're supposed to move in 1st of August and they still don't have it ready for us to move in because of the construction delays, you know, with all the problems we're seeing with code and electrical and workers and stuff. So I still haven't been able to get in there. So we have stuff scattered all over the city in storages. But this is mainly for 3 20-foot containers to butt up against the building there so we can load our existing customers. But I did want to make sure everybody understood we weren't trying to downsize our entire operation into this area. And I'll save any other time for rebuttal if it's okay.
Are there any questions for the applicant? I actually have some questions. So you mentioned Summer. Is your goal, once that's ready, to be more over there? And so that's why you're doing containers as opposed to just adding on to the building to have storage space? Like, why are you using containers?
We don't own the property.
Yeah.
We're just leasing it. The warehouse is where we'll do our dishes and our linens, and we'll keep our tent tops and staging and our bulk tables and chairs, and we'll do our deliveries mostly out of there.
Yeah.
That won't mean that we won't be doing deliveries out of this location.
Right.
Like we are now, like we've been since, 1st of August when we moved into here.
How much longer do you have on your current lease?
5 years.
5 years. Okay. You don't want to, yeah, I mean, I get not wanting to make permanent investment in a building you don't own.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Let's see. Anybody else have any questions of the applicant?
What type of containers are you putting? Are they
They're the
storage?
8 foot by 8 foot by 20 long, the freight containers. Same thing Rail Garden has, same thing Central Barbecue across the street has.
Okay.
So ours are 20 by 8.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for the speaker.
Yeah.
Who is the landlord's representative that you dealt with?
Max Hamidi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think what we're dealing with here is a classic example of the tenant is paying for the crimes, and I use that term very loosely, of the landlord. When Mr. Hamidi purchased this property 5 years ago, I told him there were zoning issues on this property, and before he did anything, leasing, improving, touching, taking the chain off the gate, he had to go through some sort of zoning process. And so I'm a little disappointed that the landlord forgot that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So am I.
It's a tough one.
It is.
This is a tough one.
And real quick, how many containers did you say you needed? Three.
I mean, you know, we can get by with 3. To butt up against the building because of an existing telephone pole, we can only fit 3. We could use 4, but 3 is all that will fit there.
Is there a back door on that building that'll be covered up? Because you're talking about butting them straight up to the building.
It's on the side, comes out.
So that's on the side. This is. Okay, any other questions?
This might be in here, but the closest home is where?
I mean, just
It's
north
right
of it.
there.
Yeah, so we have the parking lot in the back, and there is a home just
Right.
to the other side of that parking lot.
Yeah, it would be, that the gravel there is 40 feet, and then there's a 3-foot buffer. So we're talking about would be 31 feet from the fence would be the entrance to those containers. Their fence, the
Right.
residential fence.
Right.
31 feet?
Mr. Jackson?
What type of fences between property you lease, excuse me, and the adjacent residence?
It's a 6-foot wood fence.
You said parking lot is a gravel lot.
No, it's concrete.
Concrete.
Yeah. Yeah, all that in white is where they concreted it all. I think in 2014 is when all that happened.
One last question. During your negotiation of the lease, was it ever mentioned to you if there were any zoning issues with the property?
And there was no mention that it did not, even though it was zoned commercial, it had failed numerous permits for electrical because it didn't have commercial electrical in it. That was not mentioned. We spent close to $7,000 to get the electrical redone so we can move in. There was a lot of stuff not mentioned.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I have to ask the applicant this question. Did you get an occupancy permit?
Yes,
when you
we have an occupancy permit.
Did it include the storage that you have
No,
out there?
at that time, I didn't mention the storage because
You did not
I
get
had
a
to
permit?
go through this.
You did not get a permit for the storage?
But I don't have storage on there yet.
When
On
did you
the
get your
outside of the
When
building?
did you get your occupancy permit?
In August before we moved in, before we ever started moving, I guess the end of July.
Okay, so it was recent. Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, there's no containers on the property now.
Can I restate? I think what Miss Baker's asking is, did you know at that time you planned on doing storage?
But I knew that they weren't, I had to go through this process.
You knew you had to go through this, yeah, okay.
So I didn't include them in the occupancy permit. I didn't know I had to. I was told I had to go through this first.
But you did have storage out there at one time. But I mean,
They were there for a
I go
week.
by that site all the time, so.
Yeah, before we moved anything in, before we got that, I was putting them out there when I discovered that we couldn't have them out there.
Thank you.
All right, we're all thinking. If that, any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much. And I'll ask again, is there any opposition? Or anybody else that wants to speak in favor? And are there any questions of staff at this time before we go into discussion? All right, so someone give us a motion to approve BOA 2021-121 as conditioned by staff.
So moved.
Second.
Might be moving. Is there any discussion?
Chairman, let me make sure I get my arms around this,
Clarity
state
too.
this correctly. So what we have here is a commercial use that is now wanting outdoor storage that is not permitted. So they are here today to get a variance to have outdoor storage. And they are but the leaseor knew that there were issues with this site previous to him leasing it. That about what we have?
That's what I understand. And the issues, part of the issue is the entire area commercial, or is that the lot that goes east to west, is that different?
Let me reiterate quickly the history of this site. The northern east-west oriented part of the site, which is a lot of an old subdivision, that is zoned residential. When this first came to us in, I guess, 2013, it was to be the Midtown branch of the Casablanca restaurant. They ended up moving to Madison and Belvedere instead. However, they did go through the approval process. They went to City Council and got this site plan approved as part of their PD, which the purpose of the PD was to allow accessory parking to the restaurant behind the restaurant. And as you can see here, the restaurant would have adhered to the frontage requirements of the Midtown overlay with parking in the back. At some point after that happened, a contractor named Bob Cockerham obtained a permit from the plans review manager named Ted Ilsley. I'm naming names here. For a parking lot. And we don't know why that permit was approved, but it was. And the permit was maybe unclear, maybe it didn't include a site plan, but Mr. Cockerham went ahead and paved not just the back portion, but the front portion. We then cited him to environmental court, him, the property owner. At that point, he had sold, I think the Casablanca restaurant gentleman owned it, but by this time he had sold it. So the next iteration came, so we have this, it's a nice parking lot, it's concrete, not asphalt, so goodness knows it cost a lot more money than an asphalt parking lot. So I said I was gonna be brief, I'll go quick. A couple years later, Wellchild, who's at the tail end of New York, they offer certain services to the school board. They have more employees than parking, and their employees, they were trying to get their employees off the street at the northern end of New York, there at the railroad tracks. And so they attempted to purchase the parking lot, and in fact, they did purchase the parking lot. They went through the plan development process, and it was so soon after the permit had been pulled and the parking lot had been built, and there was a lot of feelings in the neighborhood that it was a highly controversial case. Wellchild, I think, withdrew before they even went to City Council. I think they just had their preliminary meeting at Land Use Control Board. So here we are, I think 6 years later, and the parking lot has generally been under court order to be chained off, so it does not provide any use, although Central Barbecue patrons have over the years permeated that chain. And so there's the history. The back part is residential, the front part is commercial.
But, Mr. Chairman, may I ask?
Yes, ma'am.
More questions of the staff. The parking lot itself, it doesn't conform to the requirements of the overlay. Isn't that true? What would have to be done to that parking lot to make it conform? Could they even have that parking lot there at all with the overlay? That's my question.
It is made somewhat less out of compliance with the overlay by joining in the neighboring parcel, which is the existing building that's part of the application today. But that in of itself does not correct the situation, because the overlay requires not only parking to be generally in the back, but the building itself has to constitute a certain percentage of frontage. So you can have a parking lot to the side but it has to, be no more than, I think, 30% of the frontage of the lot. So there really is no way for that parking lot to ever be utilized without a series of zoning situations like we're in today. So going back to that site plan that Casablanca took us, I mean, that was the only thing ever approved that allowed a commercial use in the residential district. The way plan developments work is your plan development is contingent upon a site plan, and after you go to the city council with that site plan, you then record that site plan with the Register of Deeds, and then you build in accordance with that site plan. So those last two steps were never done. So, and it's been more than 5 years since the plan development was approved. So now that back portion has no remnant of a commercial entitlement.
And shouldn't there have been streetscape, landscaping, all of those sorts of improvements as well when that parking lot was built? And it was built without conforming to any of those requirements.
That's correct. So not only does the parking lot have midtown overlay issues, but it just has general parking lot, UDC parking lot issues. The UDC requires there to be a landscaping strip between your parking stalls and the right-of-way, the back of sidewalk, which this does not.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to go on and say that I'm completely with the staff on this. This site just has so many violations that, you can't even sort them all out to be able to approve something. That said, I'm sympathetic with the plight of this individual out here who I think didn't get told the truth.
Sure.
And if he can get it out of there in 6 months, I would be okay with that, if other board members would be. So that's my thoughts on it.
So to restate that, if we put some sort of shorter sunset, and then they need to sort out to give them time to do what they need to do, but also time to sort out what really should happen, which might be a PD or something like that to really fix the use of that site. Is that correct? Or what you're trying to?
Yeah, except,
Yeah.
it would not, to me, it would not only just be a PD process, but it would also be some big-time changes to what's out there right now. I don't think a PD, I think it shouldn't come in and cure all of the violations and I think probably the staff agrees with that there'd have to be some changes to the property too.
Do you mind giving me an example of one or two changes? Because I know you know.
What the changes
Yeah, like,
should be?
I mean, is that talking about like adding landscaping? Is that what you mean by that?
Adding landscaping,
Sure, yeah.
I think that the parking lot should be pulled back from the frontage of Central to make it more in line with the requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Those would be two things.
Okay, that helps me just to understand what you mean. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And the storage, outdoor storage, the way it is with the fencing and all that, that just can't be allowed, I don't think. It's just not the place for it. And he probably doesn't need it once he gets access to his warehouse.
I think what he was saying is he always would like to use that for tables and chairs.
Then I would suggest what he should do, what would be the best solution would be to add on to the building, because then you'd have building going, taking up more of the area rather than, and the parking could be behind it. You know what I mean? It would be, it would start to be a a development that fit into the overlay, which right now, it's just so far off, and it was all done illegally, and I feel sorry, really, for this
Yeah.
individual being caught up in it.
Any other thoughts?
Go ahead. So, Ms. Baker, are you saying that you feel like we should allow this to take place for 6 months? Or you're saying no, period?
I would be, I am sympathetic enough to say, let it stay there for 6 months. Now, I hate it that there's nobody here from the neighborhood that they, can't say, okay, I'm okay with that, but I would think they would be, and so yes, I'm okay with giving him a 6-month window to get his situation straightened out. And after that, I think if he needs more space, he just needs to add on to the building, or somebody needs to. That would be really my idea of a solution to it.
The applicant stood up, and we're done with testimony. It's just us discussing unless we have people that want to hear from the applicant. Do we have 5 people who would like to get any comments from him? Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
The issue, though, with adding on is that he doesn't own the building. I don't know if it's 6 one way, half a dozen another, though. He still happens to incur expenses either way on property he doesn't own.
Right, yeah, I'm sure containers are much cheaper than
adding
on.
Building. Yeah,
but, the zoning doesn't allow him to have the containers.
Construction situation, yeah.
Mr. Jackson, yes, sir.
I have a question for Mr. Whitehead. Whitehead, I believe you have the answer, so I'm going to ask you for it. Is there a way to penalize the owner of the building so that he is forced to make changes to comply with what he should have done?
General Sessions Division 14 has the power to fine people $50 a day for an infraction to the zoning code. And I would ask Ms. Baker to confirm this, but during my tenure, that has never occurred. And I think in her tenure, that might be true. So in the past 30-ish years, the Environmental Court has never taken the zoning code to that level of heat.
So the answer to my question is probably no.
Probably not.
Another question. Does this board have the ability to force that to happen without court?
Well, if this board rejects this application, that could complicate the landlord's life because now he has a problem with his lease. Now, I recall reading some case law several years ago that zoning is generally the responsibility of tenant and not landlord. There's no implied warranty with regard to zoning when it comes to a tenant's lease. So the law really doesn't encourage that world because the landlord say, okay, you broke your lease. It's a 5-year lease. Pony up, those many months of rent because zoning was your responsibility, Mr. Tenant. So it's not a enviable place that the board or the staff is in.
Yeah, I could see there being a lease where he specifically said he could do that, and somehow the landlord might have some issue there, but that would be between the tenant and the landlord, not anything that we could really do, other than if we say okay, and that was in there, then he didn't have a reason to make the landlord do that. But
If I can go back to Ms. Baker's comments,
Right.
She had said there may be a world in which she would be open to a sunset clause. And there's a way to get some of the improvements or a sunset clause. And earlier, Ms. Baker, when you were talking about sunset and then the landscape screening, what this body could do is condition either this whole approval, or maybe just the approval tied to certain aspects of this approval to the applicant either moving in X months or X years, or making some level of improvements to the site with regard to landscaping. So that could be one way to split this baby.
Mr. Chairman. Well, I think if we were going to go there to even consider that, I would recommend we hold it because nobody's here, I know there's a lot of people who are probably concerned about this, and if we were going to go to that, I wouldn't want to just hammer it out while we're just sitting it right here. I'd rather go back and do some work on it, get people's thoughts on it, and come back and look at it again.
And that, Mr. Chairman, would give an opportunity for the applicant to put pen to paper on what
it's going to look like.
A site plan to that effect would look like.
Might also present an opportunity for Mr. Hamidi to show up to the meeting as well and answer some of these questions.
Well, just a question, because this is a leasee getting an adjustment to a property he doesn't own, but shouldn't technically the owner of the property be held accountable for, I guess, adjustments since they run with the property? So if it's on the whole, is there some type of requirement we could have him show up or attend the meeting because it's his property?
Well, we don't have sufficient power.
We don't. And a tenant has interest in the property and the ability to do that. Like, they don't need the landlord to get this variance, correct? Even though they're not the owner, but they do have rights in the property under a lease. Am I asking that question incorrectly?
I'm sorry, say that.
So it would seem to me part of what Ms. Skurlock was saying, like, where's the owner of it? He owns this. We're going to have a variance on his property, but the tenant did have rights to ask for this based on the fact of their bundle of ownership rights under their lease.
Right. We often, same thing with a potential buyer. A buyer can be an applicant to this body. We would call that an equitable
unvested.
owner.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Just so that I'm clear, Mr. Chairman, just want to make sure when we're saying even hold, we're looking for the applicant to come up with resolution as far as the parking lot, i.e. Landscaping or something of the sorts. What about the accessory buildings? Are we telling him no to those, or he needs to come up with a substitute plan? What's that on the accessory structures?
I think the problem we're having is it's just
All of them.
not allowed. And there's no to give the applicant some understanding. Like when we voted for the fire station, that had an odd shaped property. And the thing that we were voting on was it could be a little bit closer to the road because the road came at an angle. So it didn't let them just be able to have a square. You have rectangles here that are just wide open. Okay. And so there's not anything real unique about a wide open rectangle other than you want more space to store stuff, and that goes into a residential area. So that's part of the problem with the variance on this. We don't have any, it's tough to find anything that said, where we feel really bad, like, wow, what can we do? And we're just struggling to find a way to legally use our power to do it.
Gotcha.
And so I don't know even, I know what Ms. Baker would want, and I think what would look best is to expand the building, have a full plan, expand the building, use the property all in a commercial way as opposed to using the outdoor storage containers. But because that's just not really allowed in that zone. I think they're allowed in industrial zones and stuff like that. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
I mean, out on the, well, not out, but pretty much no to those because they're not allowed. And then we're looking to modify or beautify, I guess you would say, the parking lot. So are we saying no to the parking lot, or would they just need to add landscaping to the parking lot?
I think we'd want to see a site plan, you know.
I think that's in the conditions. In the conditions, there's a site, if you want to show us the conditions, that's in the site plan already. I mean, in the conditions
Okay.
already. But I think I'm trying to understand why, so it's right there by Central Barbecue, Real
Across the
Garden,
street.
and all the people, all of those guys have accessory structures. So it's kind of weirdly zoned to me.
Yeah, the south side of the street is zoned different than the north side of the street.
Yeah,
'Cause
it's weird.
There's, in that area, there's no real residences that touch it, where this, Central's kind of a buffer.
Yeah.
Still has, allows commercial that touches Central, but
Yeah.
then it goes into residential.
Yeah.
So this is bleeding into that residential area. I mean, I would agree, like, I've seen a lot worse uses, right, that you don't like, but our power is somewhat limited by, there's nothing unique other than we want more space.
Mr. Chairman, can we ask the applicant a question?
Yeah, we could, I think we would have to have 5 people that wanted to hear more testimony, but if you'd like to do that, I would be willing to do that if you're wanting to get something answered. Okay.
I would support that too.
Yeah, that's fine.
We got 4 already.
All right, yes.
Yeah, we have
Yes.
5. So yeah, Mr. Applicant, is it Mr. Sperry? Yeah, okay. We have a question.
Sir, what is the long-term intent of Dixie Rents as it relates to this space? Are you all looking at it just 5 years and you're gone? Or is this a location that you're real interested in?
We were in our old location, we leased it, we didn't own it either, in some form or fashion since 1948. We've been around forever, we plan on being around forever. We had numerous, if not majority of our customers beg us to find something in the same area. Because we've serviced Midtown forever. And that's why the idea is to be in one location, but we couldn't find a location that suited the number of walk-in customers that we have that come pick up their stuff versus just a delivery service in the area. So we decided to try this split. So we would like to be there, till something
So your
better.
intent is to be there for a
Yeah.
while, if possible?
And
Okay,
we
that
would
is-
love to,
Mr. Chairman, I have a recommendation.
Okay.
I recommend that we do what Ms. Baker says, and that's give them a 1-month hold and allow them to discuss with staff what type of improvements they would be willing to make to the property relative to trying to bring it into conformity, since they want to be there for a while, to get what they're asking for. That way we could maybe clean up some of the issues of the site, allow them to get what they want in a site plan that we could all look at and agree to with a yea or a nay.
Okay.
I'm in agreement with that.
I'm amenable to that.
And I'd strongly recommend you go back to your landlord with whatever you and staff agree upon and try to put some of that on him.
Okay.
This is really his responsibility long-term.
Well, and it's been vacant, I'm assuming, for
Right.
6-7 years, right? So.
Okay. Ms. Baker?
Mr. Whitehead, my question is, if we put this on a 1-month hold to come back with a site plan, is the neighborhood notified again?
No, we just do one mailed notice. And then once the body holds a case to a date certain, we don't remail the notice.
Well, we had several letters that were in the report. And so we know that there's demonstrated interest by the neighbors in that area, and I don't feel comfortable hammering out a solution to this when I know there's so much concern in the neighborhood, and they don't even know that it's going on. And so I don't know how you want to get around that, but.
I see one, letter that looks like it may have been mailed. It may have been, I don't see that it was emailed. I see a few emails. Would it be possible of staff to email the people, and including the Cooper Young Business Association, that, hey, this has been held? And kind of give like a little short synopsis, at least of those people.
And I would strongly recommend, I don't know what your position is with the community, the Cooper Young Business Association, but, they're all business people, and, they want you to succeed and everything. And I would strongly recommend that you sit down with them and talk about the problem that you're having, and, get them to hopefully help you come to a plan that everybody can live with. And that way, like you say, Mr. Whitehead, we finally put this property to rest after years of unrest.
Okay, any other comments? All right, so Mary, would you like to go ahead and make the motion to hold for 1 month?
Yes.
Okay.
I move that we hold this application for 1 month to give the applicant time to go back and develop a site plan and bring it back to the board, and to hopefully talk to the concerned neighbors, especially the Cooper Young Business Association.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion of the whole? We've already, okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries to hold. And I would also tell the applicant, maybe, I don't know what your position is and what you can do, but maybe part of negotiation with the landlord is maybe, if you're gonna have to put more money into something, maybe a longer term lease or something like that. So, because I know you don't want to do some improvements and you're gone in, 4 years and 8 months or something. So that's just a thought that I thought I'd throw out there to you. Thank you so much for coming down. Mr. Whitehead, will you call our final case for today?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Item number 11 is docket BOA 21-123 at 1781 Getwell. The applicant is Alonzo Ordez, represented by Denisha Smith. The use district is the CMU3 Commercial District, and the request is a variance from 263J3G to allow the use of a former car wash accessory building to serve as a tire sales establishment.
Okay, is the applicant present? Okay, very good. If y'all want to go ahead and come down front for us. Is there any opposition to this case? Doesn't look like it. Okay, thank you. Mr. Thomas, will you give us a staff report, please?
Yeah, sure. So Seth Thomas, Office of Planning and Development. So again, a case for us. It's at 1781 Getwell Road, and it's a variance to convert what formerly was a car wash accessory to a gas station into a tire sales establishment. It's in the CMU3 zoning district. And the uses surrounding are a mix between institutional, commercial, and a little bit of industrial. And the site plan, really the car wash has been abandoned for some period of time. And I believe a certificate of occupancy was filed through our building permit department to do a tire sales at that location. It was shot to our office for review, where we said that it actually goes against a portion of the UDC, and they would have to come before us for either a variance or some sort of PD to meet conformity. Here's the site. The gas station obviously being towards the northern side of the property, and the car wash you can sort of see there. It has some for sale signs on it, at least in this particular image that was taken this summer, actually, from Google Street View. And then in conclusion, really the car wash accessory building is no longer in use, and the applicant's requesting to occupy the abandoned building with the intent to sell tires. The issue that staff has with it is there's really no hardship or practical difficulty that's presented by the applicant, and so that's sort of why we're recommending rejection. However, if approved, staff is recommending that any change or deviation from the site plan would be submitted to the Board of Adjustment, and then also, as per the city moratorium on used tire sales, that if this were to be approved, that only new tires would be allowed to be sold out of that accessory structure. And then I guess I didn't include it in my presentation because they're difficult, but it also doesn't conform with Memphis 3.0, which is another reason for the recommendation of rejection. It's hard to fit all these images into slides,
right,
so I just do it on the staff report. So yeah, I'm open for any questions, and that sort of concludes my presentation.
Are there any questions for Mr. Thomas? Mr. Thomas, it seems like when I was reading, and it may have been the 3.0, that was there a specific thing that doesn't allow car washes to be made into other things?
Yeah, so that
Remind me of that.
UDC, specifically section 2.6.3J, 3G, was, I believe there has been a lot of issues the surrounding community of this type of thing happening. Yeah. And I believe there was a ZTA, I'm sure Mr. Whitehead probably has a better idea of when that ZTA was passed, but there was a ZTA passed specifically to not allow that particular thing by right. And so that's really what it's kind of coming up against, is a specific part of the UDC has been, drafted in order to not allow tire sales in used car, or in tire sales in former gas station or former car washes as accessories to gas stations.
So it could be, the building can be reused as something, but according to the UDC, that something is not supposed to be tire sales.
That's correct.
Okay, all right, very good. Any other questions of Mr. Thomas? Okay, if the applicant wants to come forward, I'll give your name and address
Mr.
for the
Chairman?
record. Yes, ma'am.
But it has to be an accessory to the convenience store with gas pumps, correct?
That's correct.
It can't be another principal use in there.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Is really
okay.
This is sort
just
of
making sure.
Two principal uses on something, because tire sales isn't allowed to be an accessory use to a convenience store with gas pumps, as opposed to a car wash is allowed to be an accessory use to convenience store with gas pumps, unless it doesn't meet the intersection requirements and otherwise. But from a use standpoint, that's the other issue, is we're creating two principal uses on one.
So like I could not just rent that portion of the property and start a cell phone store. That's right, correct. That would be another primary use.
That's correct.
As opposed to a car wash, or I don't know what else would be accessory to a gas station.
I guess like a bank teller type of
okay.
That would be something else.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Baker. That was a good clarification. All right, if you'll say your name and address for the record for me.
Smith, 105 North Beverly Boulevard.
Okay. I'm going to swear you in real quick. And is your client can also talk?
This is the leaseholder and the applicant, but he's not fluent with English, so his wife is going to speak on his behalf.
Let me go ahead and swear her in at the same time, and then y'all can split time however you want to. But if you'll say your name and address for the record, ma'am.
My name is Rita Hernandez, and my address is 1035 East Roseland Circle, Memphis, Tennessee, 38122.
Okay, do y'all swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
All right, go ahead, Ms. Smith.
Okay, the requested use of this building will be allowed by right in a commercial district if the site was on its own lot. The gas station prohibits this use because it's an accessory to the gas station. The establishment is also located in the auto-oriented district. There's a car lot across the street. There's a collision repair shop next door to it. Also, if approved, my client will only be selling new tires only and disposing of the old tires at the end of each workday. And last, variances are not required to be consistent with the Memphis 3.0 plan.
Okay. Any questions for Mrs. Smith? All right, Mrs. Hernandez, would you like to add anything? You don't, you can or not. It's up to you.
Well, I just want to ask you if you consider approve this variance for us, because honestly, when we start this project, my husband and me. We don't know. We just think it's a empty building. Like we want to convert on something really good for the street, for the community. Because get well sometimes it's not good, and we try to make a nice viewing. Also, I don't know. We don't know. We don't consider it. We spend all our savings there already. We've been paying the rent of the building because we want to do the right things, by all these resources the city gives us. We still have a lease on that building.
Was the lease that you got for a particular purpose? Well, often in a lease, it'll say what the purpose they're renting it to you for.
Yes, they say for time.
For time, okay.
I don't think the owner of the building knows about
Sure.
like us.
Yeah. You might want to consult an attorney about that. Just because if they've leased it for you for something you can't use it for, they may be in default of that lease.
Well, I know.
So just so you know.
Well, I don't know anything about laws and all the rules, what they say.
Yeah.
But honestly, for me, if I came from the expressway and I need an emergency, like I need to go do something, it's really nice location and it'd be helpful for people, but I don't know. And for us also too, because it's a family business.
Yeah.
I have a question. How long is your lease for?
It's 12 months.
Just 1 year?
How far are you into the lease? How far are you into the lease now?
Almost 4 months.
I'm in alignment with everyone else. I think they cut you an unfair deal. And I don't think, I think they should have done their work. I think perhaps they might have known that this is not allowed as a building owner for such a amount of time. So I'm in alignment. I think you all need a lawyer to talk to them because it certainly smells funky, for lack of better phrasing.
They're acting in bad faith.
Yeah, and they may not have known.
It's not a car. Let me tell you something. It's not a car wash anymore. We already. Also, we pay for that. Take all the machines, the equipment, everything down. It's a just empty building.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Hernandez? Go ahead, Mr. Malazri.
So essentially, if this were approved, you'd be able to start business tomorrow. Is it ready to go?
Is it completely built out inside with everything you need to put a tire on, or is it just an empty shell?
No.
Already built out.
No.
It's ready.
Yes, it is ready to go. Okay.
Staff has comments.
Yes.
They applied for a certificate
Sure.
of occupancy, so everything was good to go except for that, the thing needed
Sure.
to officially open the business. So, I mean, it was sort of a last ditch thing that we caught on the very end of the process of them opening.
Ideal, dude.
For business.
After a year, what happened? After a year.
So yeah, I guess that's a question. What happens after a year? Go ahead, ma'am. That was your question.
Well, what happens after a year? I know you signed a 1-year lease. Is it auto renewal, or do you have to sign a longer lease after a year?
I think renewal.
Could you repeat that?
I didn't hear you.
Yeah. She said she would have to renew the lease.
Are you bound to renew it, or you have to renew it, or you?
Auto renew.
Okay.
She's probably got
Renew the
options.
lease. I don't have to, but
So yeah, it would probably go month to month,
Yeah.
but it also means the landlord could say,
Yeah.
get out, yeah.
Got a question. Could she make the primary building, the gas station part, the tire sales, so that's the whole
But
business?
we've
'Cause
only
it's a-
leased the car wash, correct? That's still an active gas station owned by the landlord.
Yes,
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. It's subdivided. Can't subdivide like that.
Mr., or someone on staff, so I was thinking about accessory uses allowed there. Like an auto repair shop that's not just tire sales, is that allowed in such a building? That seems like an accessory use to a service station type thing.
I'm going,
And while you're looking at that, I'm guessing, and I'll have the staff, the UDC was made specific about not using these structures for tire sales because it's been done so much, and most of them, after a very short time, end up being just looking terrible, and they're just eyesores around town. I mean, that's why they specifically took this particular use to do that. And I see Mr. Thomas nodding his head. Did you find what you're looking for, Mr. Secretary?
I'll call out the exact provision that's been cited. It's under a section of the UDC falling under the gas station section of the use standards for gas stations section entitled Single Bay Automatic Car Wash. And the section reads, the car wash may not be utilized for any accessory uses not customary and incidental to convenience stores with gasoline sales, comma, such as tire sales. So we left it open specifically to allow whatever other uses that could be accessory to a gas station and convenience store. So maybe the convenience store wants to have a little slushy stand, right? We all go to a convenience store, we expect a slushy stand. So that would be an example of an accessory use permitted under this clause, because those are customary and incidental to gas stations. Tire sales are not, and they are the only use listed as not.
So I'm thinking of like, I know it's not, it's in Germantown, but you have the service station that's there right in the middle of Germantown. That's, I think it's an Amico right in front of where the old Germantown car wash was.
It's a bad example because they just announced they're removing.
They're no longer a gas
pumps.
station. Yeah, they're removing their gas. But back then,
I remember.
so that's, to me, when I think convenience store, my grandfather owned one and it had a service station in it. It was the same thing, but he didn't sell tires, right? And so even if he was changing oil and doing other type, minor repairs, tire sales is still off the table, even as accessory use is probably a defined term, but even as part of what the other accessory use is. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
It's hypothetical, but there's three categories of vehicular uses. One is vehicle service, then the next is vehicle repair, and then the highest intensity is vehicle sales. And as you go up higher in that ladder, you require a more intense entitlement. So automobile service could potentially be, oil change. I don't know. Would we consider an oil change in this bay? Maybe. We'd have to jump off that bridge when we get to it. The problem is customary and incidental when? 50 years ago or today?
Right.
But again, it says tire sales, because that was the specific use identified by the city council specifically for the initiation of this provision.
Any other questions of the applicant? Hearing none. All right, thank you all very much. Would someone like to move to approve BOA 21-123 as conditioned by staff?
So,
Second.
Any comments? I mean, I don't know what we can do. Like, I think we're stuck similar to the last case that like it can be used for other things. The only hardship, which I feel terrible about, is that they built it out to replace tires, but that's not something we can use. You know, sometimes you'll have places where it's tire cells, but it was doing tire cells, you know, before, and it just was like slightly over a year they stopped because of something, but we're not there. I mean, it's never been used for tire cells. So it's opening up something that city council has basically said, you don't do this. Any other comments?
I mean, I would be open to putting a very short sunset clause to let the tenant get out of their lease, and then we end it there.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I mean, can we make that exception to do the sunset, like with their 4 months in?
So 8 months,
So
or
8
10
months,
even.
or even 12. I mean, 12 months.
what will they be doing at that time? Moving?
Well, they have 8 months to get out of the lease, and maybe recoup some money. Hopefully recoup some money in the 8 months. I would advise a little markup on your prices for a couple months. But yeah, to give them time to recoup and then have a plan B to get, into a new space or
I wouldn't do those
something.
Other thoughts? Ms. Baker, yes.
Mr. Whitehead, I'm going to complain a little bit here, and I think you will probably join in with me, because what it looks like to me is, and I could be wrong about this, but it looks like to me that these people got marched along into their everything they had to do to get an occupancy permit, make all the improvements and the electrical and everything that had to be done at great expense. And then right at the end, it's like, whoop, now you got to go get the use approved. Am I right about that?
You're right.
Mr. Thomas?
So I look to see if there were violations or whatever on that property, everything violation-wise or anything in the Acela system so far that I found was all having to do with signage, had nothing to do with this particular use. Now, it's harder for us to find the mechanical or electrical permits because they're not done specifically at this office and have to go through review through Golden Station. However, and so I'm not sure if they did those permits and were issued those, and then the certificate of occupancy was sort of the last hurrah, because we don't get sent electrical permits or mechanical permits, but we would get sent that certificate of occupancy in order for review. I believe it was Mario Moulton who was the staff planner who sent it our way, and I would have to check with him to see if in fact, electrical or mechanical or whatever else was, involved with remaking the site and making those changes,
Mr. Chairman, can we go to the next board member who hopefully will ask another question, while Mr. Thomas, all of those permits will be on Acela. So if you can take a moment, go on Acela and look up this address, and then we can put a pin in Ms.
Well, I mean,
Baker's
you don't have to answer it. I don't know why. I just had to say it.
Well, ideally, once the new process is once anybody asks for certain application types, it triggers our review. Now, we have a certain threshold today that once we build our staff up a little, it'll be increased. But I think currently it's just permits for expansions, accessory buildings, and new buildings, and COOs. So if you take an existing building, we would not what I would like to know is if there were any, and it looks like we don't even have access to the internet, but
It's just going to take forever.
I mean, it just seems like it'd be so easy to check the use first, but apparently it's not, so. That's all.
I think you don't know. I think you just don't know what you don't know, if you're kind of new to this. And I still believe that the onus was partially on the landlord to be forthcoming and transparent about what's allowable in that space. Clearly, they're new to this business or new to business ownership maybe. So I don't know.
What you're kind of saying, Ms. Baker, is that why isn't it that when I go to apply for any permit, I'm not saying what my use is going to be, so that it then triggers whether or not, before I get too far into it.
Flagged early.
It seems to make more sense that would have been brought up earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be one of the first questions.
Oh, you turned your mic, yeah.
You don't ask that question first,
You've
then
already
you
spent your
could
money.
essentially, and I know it happens all the time, it's a pet peeve, that's why I had to bring it up. But the poor applicant can get to the very end and have spent a lot of money, and then suddenly, well, wait a minute, that use isn't permitted here, So, just complaining, that's all. I know it's hard because there's so many applications.
Sure, yeah.
It definitely should have been flagged earlier. Absolutely. Yeah. Before they got this far down the line and built out the space.
Any other comments about this? We have, at least Ms. Doss was talking about possibly doing an 8-month sunset.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
when I look at this case, and there's some others that have been similar to it, have compassion for the applicant is one thing. No, we got to figure out a better way to do this. There's just got to be a better way. JT, I think you came up with a really good compromise. I think we ought to sunset it for the 8 months. That's it. That way they get to recoup some dollars out of it. And I mean this sincerely. It's not like this one facility, even if it was, which we hope it's not, a bunch of used tires outside ain't gonna improve or not improve the look of Getwell Road from the interstate up to Park Avenue. Okay? Ain't like we lost something here. Ain't like this in Germantown or Bartlett where it's gonna make a visual blight. It's already a blighted situation as it speaks. I just call it what it is. So I recommend we allow him to do it with a sunset at the end of it. But I think before we adjourn today, we ought to really touch on some new business relative to that.
Do you think, I think cushion is probably necessary. I would be inclined to say maybe 10 months, just to add a little cushion just in case time. You never know what's going to happen. Would you be in agreement with 10 months?
No difference in 10 or 8.
Well, I think they already said they're.
I mean, they have a 1-year lease.
Yeah, they got a
so that's
1-year
why
lease, and they're already 4 months into it, so.
Yeah.
We're already going past there. I mean, obviously, just like Chairman said, they'll probably go month to month. We don't have the lease in front of us, but.
I think we stick with 8.
Yeah.
They need to start working now on
Yeah.
finding that new space.
And finding a lawyer.
Yeah.
A part of this decision, though, too, does the property owner get notification of this? Because the property owner, the landlord, needs to know why and what's going on, and to be put on notice so that if you should seek legal counsel.
Yeah, I would have
Agreed.
my
Right.
attorney call them.
Right.
Possibly. And it could be, I've not seen the lease. I don't know. I'm not trying to give legal advice from up here.
Yeah,
But
definitely not.
it does help if somebody rents you something for a particular purpose, as opposed like, oh, we want to rent the building.
Right.
And then you want to do something else. I think might be some wiggle room on that, on what you can do. And maybe, during those 8 months, instead of finding a new location, you find a new way to use the building that's an accessory use that's allowed that just won't involve tire sales. So we're going to add, with a friendly amendment of an 8-month sunset to the existing conditions. I see enough heads nodding. Mr. Whitehead, will you give us, is there any other discussion before we vote? Will you give us a roll call, please?
Yes, sir, and I do have an answer from Ms. Baker.
Oh, go ahead.
There were no, the only, well, I don't know what screen we're looking at now. There were no permits pulled for any of the internal improvements made on this car wash. Roll call. Ms. Baker.
Yes.
Mr. Claybrook.
Yes.
Ms. Dawes.
Yes.
Mr. Jackson.
Yes.
Mr. Melasry.
Yes.
Vice Chair Savage Towns.
Yes, I find that the standards of 9.22.6 of the UDC are being met and will not be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
Ms. Gerlach.
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman.
No.
We have 7 ayes and 1 no.
The motion passes. Thank you all and best of luck to you. That's the last of our called cases. Do we want to talk about any new business today, possibly? I don't know.
I would like to if the board has some time.
Yeah, we're done earlier than normal, so. If you, would you like to, yeah, absolutely, thank you.
Mr. Secretary, no, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Secretary, I have a question for you. You know, this situation in 30 years, environmental court has never found someone. You know, that's a real hindrance, and I'm not saying this to you, but I want it on public record. That's a real hindrance to this board being able to do its job and function like it should. And my question, or maybe not, my question is, can we not have some type of meeting, session, discussion, or whatever with environmental court relative to how they operate? I mean, I just feel like, you know, if we can't get someone, an owner of a piece of property to do something, and he's been warned 5 years, and you still won't find him? I mean, you know, I hate to tell you this, but you as a judge aren't doing your job. I mean, let's be real about this. I mean, we really want Memphis and Shelby County to be as great as we want it to be, which I think we all do, or we wouldn't be serving on this board. And we need some backbone from some other people. And, you know, it may be too strong a way to put it to environmental court, but at least it needs to be, why can't you help us do this by doing this? I mean, there's only 2 ways to get people's attention. You know, it's either you're going to fix it where they can't eat, or you're going to impact their pocket. You know, and impacting someone's pocket will make a change. And environmental court has the ability to do that. I think one of the reasons why we find so much blight in our area is because we can't get environmental court to move. And that's just unfortunate. And I know government probably can't tell them, but maybe hearing it from some others, probably put more tactful than my passion is about it at this moment, to them might make a difference. Is it possible we could have that meeting, or is that just not possible that the board can meet with the judicial branch to make that type of conversation?
Well, anytime there's more than 2 of you, or excuse me, more than 1 of you, it's, you know, a public hearing.
Sure.
That is number 1. But we are engaging in conversations with the court. I know one of the issues with environmental court is it's a relatively new court. It's hard at this moment in time to think about this, but it used to be worse. There did not used to be a section of general sessions specifically geared towards municipal code, such as zoning. So when Division 14 was created, it was meant to be the specialized court for this purpose, and the city's maintenance code, et cetera. But I think it might be a victim of its own success, because now Division 14 is by far the division with the busiest docket. That said, I am a little more relaxed in this conversation now than I would have been yesterday, because a matter that I have been working on specifically with the inspectors for several years has finally been resolved, and that's at the corner of Danny Thomas and Adams. There was a repair shop there. This body went through several iterations with the Abra, I think, collision next door in the old Tedesco building. And it was a little disheartening that you make, property owner A go through all these hoops, and then property owner B next door was conducting well outside of the realms of the zoning code. Well, it took a while, but the court did stay on that case, and if you've noticed, the tenant has finally vacated. So it takes time, and I hear everything you're saying, and I agree with most of the things. I don't want to catch aspersions, but yes, we are in constant contact with environmental court to lessen this. Now, that said, there will always be people who are ignorant of the zoning code and or will feign ignorance, and so we'll always have those situations.
So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary, you danced all around my question. Can we meet with them or not? You have to respect my feelings. I don't have any, but we either can or we can't.
How about this? Let's set something up, a representative, and I think maybe Mr. Jackson, you're volunteering.
Yes.
To be that representative, to sit down with Judge Dandridge, and we'll coordinate. How would that sound, Mr. Chairman?
I've texted John Cameron, who's the administrator. I have to just kind of chat with him a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are these secret things you're saying?
Oh, I've texted, I think he's considered the court administrator. I don't know if that's the right name, John Cameron.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna have a phone call with him just to kind of see how we work in concert with each other and what we can expect the other person to do. I don't know Judge Dandridge, but I do know him.
Okay.
So.
Well, do you want to try that first?
If that's okay.
We'll go from there.
Then I'm happy to report back on what I can.
Yeah.
But if we do meet with Judge Dandridge, I would like to sit in on that meeting.
Well,
if I may.
Only one
May I
can
interrupt
attend.
you? May I interrupt you though? I wouldn't have a problem with it being a public meeting because I think we could get enough support from the Memphis community and Shelby County that they would finally say, here's a board that really wants to do something. And let it be out in the public, because maybe the pressure from the public might help move this along. It's just a thought, but I don't have an issue.
I got a couple more questions before you even say anything. So on our Danny Thomas Adams deal, finally got our tenant out. Were they ever fined? Did they ever actually pay fines?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. And then once, and you probably don't know this at all since they don't fine very often, if they do fine, how do they ever collect that fine?
30 years, ain't nobody living that's been there that long.
Yeah. Like I can fine you all day long, but if I'm not collecting, it's somewhat, not moot, but just pointless. And maybe that's why the collection process doesn't work.
But does that
But that
fix
could be
the
part
problem?
of it. I'm going to ask Mr. Cameron about that.
That doesn't fix the problem, because if
Right.
we're trying to rid of bad behavior and there's no consequences to my bad behavior, I'm just gonna keep doing it. And I'll just pick another spot. Hey, I didn't get dinged for this time, so I'll do it this way, And it's like, at what point do we either allow that and say, oh, this is just the system and go with it, or we fix the system while we have an opportunity to do so?
And I'm sure that there's lots of cases that they get similar to this.
Sure.
Where you feel, you want to be, I have the power to say this and this, but man, I feel for these, I want to do what I think is equitable in that situation, as opposed to, and I'm sure you have just the bad actors.
Right.
Right. Which I'm sure the Adams, they just did what they wanted to do for a while. So.
I got a question. How did they haven't applied for any of their permits to do the work inside?
So the question was, if someone does not obtain permits and then they file for a COO, is there any review of any improvements having been made? And I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, it's very possible that whatever they did was taking some things out, and it didn't involve them having to put new electrical in. They had some things they just had to. I mean, I have no idea. I can see it.
There's one of those at the corner of Summer and Graham that I drive past all the time.
Right.
It's just stacked full of tires. It doesn't look, they changed the tires out in the parking lot, so.
Yeah, I can't imagine the build-out being super extensive.
Not for that.
Yeah, Mr. Thomas.
Electrical is concerned, my assumption would be they have the amount of like wattage and voltage.
Sure.
I mean, car wash is using an insane amount of electricity, so they most likely didn't need the electrical review in the first place.
Right.
It sounded like they just moved in equipment and tools or whatever it is that they have used for that.
Which is a big air compressor. And, yeah.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm getting word that the Mayor Strickland's office is working with Judge Dandridge on this. So I'm going to defer to those deliberations before we wade in too heavily.
But I'm still okay just to kind of talk to Mr. Cameron, correct?
Well, it's too late now.
Yeah, well, he hasn't texted back yet.
No, you're fine.
And that's on the record.
Got another question.
Yeah.
How do we get code enforcement to get this entity involved earlier so we can head off some of the problems as Ms. Baker said? How do we do that?
Can you rephrase?
For instance, like if somebody goes to pull a permit, electrical, mechanical, and whatever on an existing building, and they pull it, and then come to find out the use they want to use needs a variance, so now they got to come to us. How can we get on the front end of that process?
Well, we have, in the last 6 months, we have changed the process drastically, where our staff, your staff, now reviews every permit for a new building, accessory building, expansion to a building, or a COO. To increase the level of work for, I hear what you're saying, that why should we should be able to do a use review before we do the final review. But I think it's going to be a little bit of looking for a needle in a haystack, because the volume of the plumbing permits and electrical permits, 99.9% have no use problems. For us to increase our staff, which I guess is theoretically possible, to increase our staff to do a use review on every one of those thousands of permits, looking for that needle, I don't know if we get a good return on investment through that.
Can't we put that earnest on the back of the person applying for the permit with changing the application that says, is your use permitted? Let them tell us, is it permitted? You see what I'm saying? And if they need to change the use of the building, then that automatically sends the flag to code enforcement, and they just automatically forward it over. So you don't have to sift through all of them. You just sift through the ones that need, to be looked at. Is that possible?
I'll look into it. This is my sister department we're talking about, so I'm not familiar with that process. But the applicants that come before you, if you put a question on their permit, what's your use? Is it permitted?
I'll say this: I won't feel so bad about saying no when they have stated it was permitted. Oh, did you find out? Oh, I just figured it was. Like, that's a little different than, at least somebody made them have to think to answer the question. And they could have gotten advice.
A plumbing permit or an electrical permit, what is your use? That's going to require this code is not designed for the plumbing permit tech to say, and also use, there's about 100 uses listed in here.
Yeah.
There's probably 1 million uses in people's brains. And so matching the use that you just put on your permit for the plumbing permit tech to match it to whatever is inside here. And this code is kind of just like every zoning code, and probably to a lesser degree, a collection of cobbled together ordinances. It's really not designed for the plumbing permit tech to interpret. So I see where you're going. The way I think maybe another way to do it is by signing yes, by clicking yes, you affirm.
That's what I was about to say.
The use is permitted.
That's kind of like where it is on the applicant to find out, and maybe they don't. But like I'm sure, like I have no idea what happened on this case, or we had a recent case with the childcare in that residential area. And it could be, you know, she did a build out there, but that build out, I'm guessing, was a lot of cleared all the rooms, put in tables and stuff like that. There were no real permits that had to be pulled until it got dinged. She didn't get dinged, so it wouldn't really help on the plumbing thing, but I mean, she should have figured it
I was
out.
using plumbing as an
Yeah, but I mean,
example.
sometimes we can't catch them, but I like the idea of I hereby affirm, I have confirmed that this use is whatever. You know, and just a little statement on it.
It's just like going to court, you know, you say, I'm gonna tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, and you don't, and you're filed in contempt. It don't matter if you knew or not.
Right. Or downloading an app.
Yeah.
And you said, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you've agreed, whether you're in it or not. Well, I'm trying to focus us on glass half full here. This last case was evidence that the new system works, right? They requested a certificate of occupancy. It got shot to our staff, and we flagged it. I mean, it was after the lease was signed, et cetera, but it is showing that the trajectory.
The arc is changing for the better.
The arc is changing.
Yes, I agree.
Because we had two cases in a row of where the owner of the property didn't have to be here. But if it's something concerning accessory structure, is there some way we can be worded that the owner of the property must attend? I mean, because there's a lot, had the owner of the property seen this discussion right there and we recommend you get a lawyer, all of a sudden that's hitting him in his pocket and he sees it.
They have to sign the application. I mean, we deal with it all the time. So technically, if they're signing the application, they should acknowledge or acknowledge. I mean, most of the time I deal with it as somebody's buying a piece of land and it's not zoned for that, or they're getting some sort of variance, and you know, we look at them as the owner and the owner's representative. So technically, they should be looking at that. I understand why the first one didn't look at that, but who knows who owns that gas station? I mean,
Yeah.
there's no telling.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have to be local, definitely.
Yeah, but I appreciate the board's time and
absolutely.
staff's time.
Any other comments before we adjourn? We don't have any other announcements, do we? Can you confirm our date for next month's meeting, since it's not going to be the fourth Wednesday? Would you mind doing that?
Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. It'll be the third Wednesday, which is November 17th.
And then what about December?
I think I said it for the 4th.
We had time to do it, because I believe Christmas is on a Saturday, or it might even be a Sunday or something. It seemed like when I looked at I was looking at that.
22nd or 29th?
22nd would be the 4th.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and if we haven't sent notices out, obviously, for December, so if the board would prefer the 15th, so we can get a quorum, please let me know, and we can make that happen.
I know I'm in town for Christmas, so the normal date is, I think we'll do the 22nd if that's what you've already put out there, just so, even though we could change it. Well, with nothing further, this meeting